One of the things that movies do to touch us on a deeper level is to have a theme, some underlying concept that it wrestles with in order to give the film more meaning. Themes are great, but honestly they kind of drive me crazy a little bit. No writer, no writing teacher, no author, no one really agrees on a standard definition of a theme or what that truly means, but everyone acts like their definition is the definition. Some treat theme like the moral of the story, a lesson that needs to be taught to the audience, like in Aesop's Fables or something. Like, don't put work before your family might be a theme in The Shining. Others see theme like it's an issue to be wrestled with, like a political or moral issue of the day. For example, the Godfather movies dealt with the idea of loyalty to family above all else. Citizen Kane wrestled with the idea of obtaining power and what that does to our innocence. Some writers feel that the theme should be out in the open and obvious, but some feel like that gets too blatant or preachy. Avatar, for example, was a very thinly veiled attack on the Iraq War, and the theme was to leave other cultures and their resources alone. Some writers feel that the theme should be obvious and be intertwined with the plot, the way that There's No Place Like Home drove The Wizard of Oz. Some feel that the theme should be stated early in the movie verbally by a character, such as in Forrest Gump.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get.
Through the rest of the film, we see the futility of planning a future because life is unpredictable. This was the theme of the film. We also stated the theme early on in both versions of The Assurance. In the original version, which centered on Tayani letting go of Cordeia to save the world, after the prologue we cut to the girls in the hut, and their first words give us the theme.
Are you ready?
Not yet.
So this question and answer had a dual meaning. On the surface, it was about Tayani being physically ready to go on the journey. She's packing stuff up, all that kind of stuff. But on a deeper level, it also suggested the whole theme of the film that Tayani wasn't quite ready to let Cordeia go on her journey. In the final version of the film, which is about Cordeia getting her self-confidence, the first words she speaks at the beginning of the film are these.
It's so hard to believe.
This also has a dual meaning. On the surface, she's referring to being abandoned by Tayani. But she's also stating the emotional theme of the film. It's so hard to believe. It's hard for her to believe in all this business about the gods. It's hard for her to believe that her sister was right about everything. And most of all, it was hard for her to believe in herself. Sometimes, in lieu of a theme, the whole film is basically like a parable, like just one huge metaphor. This was extremely common in the days of McCarthyism in the United States. Many actors were getting blacklisted because they were accused of being communists, and speaking out against that could get you blacklisted as well. So filmmakers often made films like the classic western High Noon, which is about a cowboy that can't get anyone in town to help him stand up to outlaws that are coming to attack the town. This is a very clear metaphor about McCarthyism, and this metaphor kind of takes the place of the theme. I mean, the whole story itself is the theme. Now, for me personally, all these can work as a theme. I don't feel like it's necessary to quantify exactly what a theme is. I think the whole point is that there's some other issue beneath the surface that makes the story more true and meaningful. I do feel, though, that you usually shouldn't go into a film with a theme to prove. Like, you shouldn't start writing a film with a theme in mind, because that's when things kind of feel forced and preachy. One time I actually did start with a theme unintentionally. I noticed that a lot of people in the world blame their problems on some other group of people. Politics is probably the most clear example of this, but happens all the time. And then people justify their own bad behavior because they think some other group is terrible, which is fascinating to me. And inspired by that, I wrote Empathy for the Devil, which is about Satan getting really sad that he gets blamed for everything, so he goes on a public relations campaign to improve his image. I realized that because this concept came about because of my interest in personal accountability, if I didn't tone down the theme, it would feel preachy. So the theme in Empathy is actually so subtle that no one notices it. It was basically just the impetus to help me create the story. Typically, though, I write my first drafts without any regard to theme. And I find that if I'm writing truthfully, the issues that I'm personally struggling with in my own life will be manifested in the plot or the characters, or both. And then, on the next draft of the script, I can go through and develop the theme a little bit more after spotting it. For example, after going through the first draft of The Assurance, I realized that Tayani was dealing with something that was akin to my personal struggles with bad habits. Tayani needed to push Cordeia away, like I needed to push away ice cream. And like me in ice cream, Tayani loved her a lot, and it was a struggle to do the right thing, but for the greater good, she had to let it go. Having this personal connection to Tayani made her and her struggle much more real and personal to me. Would anyone else have noticed that theme? I don't know, probably not. But it still made the story and the motivations more real and honest. For the rewrite of the story, the final version of the film, we shifted focus to Cordelia. And just the fact that I had to do this, I had to rewrite and re-edit this movie and start over again in this work that's going to be seen on by such a big audience, it was devastating to me. It's embarrassing. So I really gravitated towards Cordelia becoming more self-assured because I sure could have used a huge portion of that myself right about then. So it was cathartic to watch characters that I have so much in common with overcome these huge obstacles. And this is another thing that theme does. It really tethers an audience to characters. So even if your audience doesn't notice your theme, they will sense it, and it will make for a much more potent viewing experience.